So, Kristin, first of all, I want to thank you so much for being on my podcast. I truly, truly feel honored. You've always been my inspiration to just view life from a different lens. And your friendship means the world to me. And I am just so incredibly excited that you are sharing all of your experiences, well, at least some of them with us. You're a mother of seven. How many grandchildren?
7.
Seven. You have seven. All right. You have over 33 years in holistic health and expertise in energy medicine, energy psychology, and massage therapy. You're also the founder of and CEO of Let's, which is a global nonprofit addressing trafficking, poverty, and abuse. You are recognized as an impact consultant, legacy advisor, humanitarian, strategist, and the list goes on. I am really excited to hear about your spiritual experiences, your NDEs, and just some of the insights that you were given from the divine. So,
Thank you.
right.
I'm so excited to be here too, because the message that you're bringing to the world, Jessica, is such an important topic. I think it is at the heart of, really at the heart of each of our souls, at our spirits, of longing to go home and longing for what's next and what's possible and who are we? That question of who am I and why am I here and where am I going and why does it all matter anyway? And it impacts us. This here and the hereafter impacts us so profoundly. And so I really honor that you started this channel and that you're sharing your own personal messages, because it takes a lot of courage. I really mirror back to you how much love and respect I have for you and the growth that you and I have had as friends over the years to walk this journey together. And I know that we as friends talk about what we're going to be talking about today often, but we've never had this exact conversation. So I'm really excited that you invited me into this specific dialogue.
That's amazing. I am really hoping that many people will gain a lot of insight from the things that you're going to be sharing. So I look forward to hearing what you have to share with us. Sounds good.
I think the first question that I would ask all of us, and this is the first phase of what my memory from my near-death experience of the most profound thing, and that is, what is my capacity to love? If I boil everything down to what I call the here and the hereafter, is this space in between. And it is the space of eternity, but I've always called it, I came back calling it the space of love. And so after I share a little bit later about my experience, I'll talk to you about that. But that's where I want to start, is I want you to ask yourself, and even just scan our bodies right now to say, what is my capacity to love? How open am I? So if you could kind of just feel into your heart and into your mind, into the emotion center, and down into the deepest of our wounds. Like, is it constricted? Or do you feel open and liberated, where it's breathing and there's this breath of life that moves in and out? So I want to start there, because in essence, that is why we're here, because love is actually intelligence, and intelligence is light, and it's in, through, and around everything. And so that's my start. And it's been my quest. It's been my entire life, for as long as I could remember, was to love purely. And the things that we struggle with the most are the things that we're here to move through, that will be the catalyst. Our greatest pain, our deepest sorrows, our losses, our desires, our unmet dreams, all of these things are actually portals into a catalyst of growth. It's the catalyst of evolution. And so what was interesting is, you said, like, you've always, I think you said something about, like, you've appreciated my perspective. And I do see the world through a different lens. I always have. We're all born with spiritual gifts. We're all born with a You can call it whatever you want, but we have an intelligent blueprint living inside of us. That's what makes all of us different. I've had 7 children housed inside my body, and I could feel the difference of energy and intelligence that was inside me. And then when they were born, and now I have adult children who have children, these children, from the moment of those first impressions, that's still there. So I knew very early on, even in my marriage, like, we come intelligently designed. And I didn't have anything to do that. My husband making a baby, we didn't create this intelligence. I just housed it. Like, we became the physical aspect of it. But I was always aware that there's something inside these human shells that doesn't belong to this planet. And so anyway, there's a lot to this story, and I do see the world differently because of my experiences. But I do think, because I was born with a specific design, that I've also had a path or a journey mission to experience things to teach me, because I was designed to teach. I'm here as someone that I would say would be an oracle, someone that, and I, it's taken me a lot of years to even say those words, because it just feels kind of awkward, right? How many years have you told me
Finally
that?
coming out.
I know, like, here I am. Listen, I just went through, like, in my late 40s, I went through Chiron returns, and that's kind of like the wounded healer. It takes 50 years for this comet kind of planet to come back in. And I didn't grow up around astrology, so I just didn't know a whole lot about it. But I've learned through Gene Keys and human design a little bit more about astrology. And that Chiron return was at like age 50, 49, 50, 51, in those areas. And all of a sudden, that's kind of a coming home. It's kind of like I finally reached adulthood now. Like, I am embodied in who I am on this planet right now. And so yes, I haven't used the words oracle. I haven't used medium or channel or any of those types of words, because I don't know. I was just still awakening to not my gifts, but to the ownership of how they're used. And so anyway, I came with a design that has the ability to see through the veil. And as long as I can remember as a little girl, that was my story. Were you one of those kids that you're afraid of the dark, or you had make-believe friends and you had conversations? I don't know. I was one of those kids where I was constantly in my imagination, and I was always having tea parties, and I was having stuffed animals, and I was always talking to my friends. But to me, they were very real. To the people in in my adults in my life at the time, they just thought it was cute. I was just make believing and things, but I actually had a real connection to that. And so, again, for as long as I could remember, I was kind of afraid of the dark, because I could sense through the veil. I could see spirits. I could hear them talking. And they didn't really, in my younger formative years, I don't remember them having direct conversations with me, but it was like I was observing them all around me. And so it kind of freaked me out, because nobody else was talking about it. And didn't really talk about it either, because I was kind of like, I don't know, even at 4 or 5 years old, I kind of knew, I just kind of had that feeling. Um, but I did talk about, like, being afraid of the dark, and I would run up the stairs and I would be like looking behind, thinking, I wonder if something's behind me, because while the veil was very thin, it's not like I came with an instruction manual. And I kind of wish that somehow, if you have those gifts, you could hear the spirit speaking to you, going, it's going to be okay, honey. That wasn't my story. I just, for some of us, because of our design and what we're here to teach and to do and to experience, our evolutionary process of why we even came here, mine just included the veil being thin. But it's taken me, I call it my drip education, even into my 50s, where I get to now be like, I can see the themes now. I get it. And so that's why I'm coming more confident in the way that I'm leading with the most important things that I have learned. And that will be for me and the people who want to hear that resonate with me, because we all hear from different people. I only have stewardship over whoever's called to hear from the things I have to share. When I was 5 years old, the first recollection of a very, like, through the veil experience was I was in the bathtub. I had been partially, very closely raised with a set of like surrogate grandparents who loved me so deeply. They were a lot older, and they helped my mom when she was very ill when she was pregnant after my birth. And George showed up in the bathtub. My mom went to get a phone call. I was in the bathtub. She left the bathroom and he came in, and he was standing there as sure as you and I are standing each other in physicalness. And he said, Kristin, I want to let you know that I'm not going to be on the planet anymore. You're not going to be able to see me in my physical body, but I'm not really going anywhere. I'll always be with you. I'll always be with you. And I want you to know how much I love you. And you don't need to be afraid. You don't need to be afraid. They're going to call it death. You know, he's talking to me. And it was all done fairly quickly. But at my age, at 5 years old, it was just, this was like kindergarten, right? Pre-K kindergarten age. And so he just said, I just want you to know I love you. And though it looks like I'm gone, I'm not actually gone. And he said something in my language, which was, I'm going to go be with Jesus. And so you know that I'm okay. And I was like, okay, sounds good to me. You know, I have no attachment to it. So my mom comes in like 5 minutes after she had left, tears rolling down her face, and she's just really upset. And she doesn't talk to me for a while, and she's washing my hair, and you know, I'm in this bathtub, and I'm just fine. I'm actually kind of I'm like energized. And she puts her hand on me and she said, honey, I don't really know how to tell you this, but George, he passed away. He died. Do you know what that means? And I was like, oh, yeah, it's totally fine, Mom. He already told me. So like that was, my mom was like, wait, what? So that was at 5 years old, that was my first recollection of me having a conversation with my mom. And my mom was also very, a lot like me, but she also grew up in a generation and she never talked about that. And so she was very sensitive with me and she listened to me. And I was just matter of fact, super simple. And she's just like, that's a really special experience. You know, cherish that in your heart. But that was kind of it. I don't remember other dialogues around that. And here's another thing is that there's all kinds of forms of near-death experiences. One of mine after that, the next story that I would share with you is I had a brother who he was 4 years older than me, and I was always wanting to be with him, and he just never wanted to be with me. And I'd want to sleep in his room and he'd get in trouble, and he was always trying to ditch me. So there was this time we lived in Montana, and we had this horse corral for training the horses. So it was kind of small round thing, but it was very tall. And I was sitting on the top with him, and he kept trying to get rid of me, and he was throwing little stones at me because I think he was playing on the inside, and he was throwing things at me, and I wouldn't leave. And I was like, you said I could play with you. And anyway, boys being boys, I think I was 7 years old at this time. He literally took a 2x4 and he wanted to hit me off the top of the fence where it hit my head. And so the strike of it hitting my head knocked me off the fence, and I was out. I have no idea how long I was out. And it's in those moments in reflection that I have the tools to be able to go into those moments in my life that were, you know, fairly traumatic, and know that they were there, and know that the messaging was there, and to later on in my life go back in and say, like, what was shown me when I was passed out, what actually happened, and to be able to go in and extract these most important nuggets that kept me moving along my journey. Even though I couldn't remember them, they were always there. So please know, wherever you guys are in your journey, that the light is consistently shining. The light is knowledge. The light is intelligence. It is love. It is always shining all the time. And we get to choose with our agency where we focus our energy and what we're gonna see. And part of it's all part of the story. You're not doing so hot if you only see the darkness. And it's not about judgment or anything. It's just that the light is consistent. And we as humanity for thousands of years have been raised in a distorted information field. And this information field is beginning to reorganize right now. We're all feeling it. We're all like, oh, finally, I'm going to start to breathe again and liberate. Like we want to live on this planet because people, it's going to get messy and that's okay, but it's organizing. So we can go in to some of these memories of our life, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, that this is pockets of information just as valuable as a near-death experience. So most of us, well, I'm going to say every single one of us have had pockets of information which is coming from the same space of love that many of us report back in a, you know, NDE experience category. So at that time, I had a lot of, I mean, that there hitting my head caused significant damage, but I didn't know it. My brother, I woke up, my brother was above me. Don't tell mom, don't tell mom. You can sleep with me. I'll play with you the rest of the day. You know, just like a 10-year-old would say to us, you know, 10, 11-year-old. And I started wetting the bed. So I know that I had some pituitary issues and some signals that got crossed, some damage in there, but I never told my mom. I just started wetting the bed. So like there was this thing that later in my life I could come back full circle with near death things and what I've learned with my own physical health that started in that 7-year-old moment, right? So near death experience number one happened at 7 years old. I don't remember laying over seeing my body. I was blacked out, but I know that it was significant in the training process and where I was during those moments that feel like minutes, which are actual hours in other spaces. And so, or downloads rather. And so then, you know, 9 years old, George's wife, Lottie, died. I was downstairs in a different house and she showed right up to me, just like George did, and just said, it's my turn. I'm going to be with George. And my mom again, weeping, coming and telling me. And I was like, Lottie already told me she's gone. And I was very devastated with Lottie because I was missing her. And so I was a little older too. I was now, yeah, I was probably 9 years old at that time. So anyway, that's kind of those moments, but all through those years, I'm still seeing and hearing spirits. I'm becoming a little bit older. The death and life thing is starting to take more meaning. I had a cousin when I was 9 and 10 years old who was hit by a car driving with her mother, and it hit her side of the car and she was killed, and she was my best friend. And so here I am again facing death at a young age to go like, what? I don't understand. Like, I just played with her yesterday. I just spent the weekend there. Like, where did she go? And how come I can't go with her? And why was it her? And I'm not, like, I had all the questions. And I don't remember seeing Janny through the veil. I don't remember that. I don't have a recollection of that, but I just, these themes of between the veil, always like these questions. And so then as I got older into my teenage years, we will call that the troubled stage, because those were the years of really, really searching about who I was and feeling so misunderstood, being a very sensitive child, energetically and also emotionally. I was just, I don't know, I didn't have the resiliency that I probably could have thrived with had I had a little stronger disposition in that area. But I could, at that point, I had a fascination with understanding my gifts a little bit better, but they certainly weren't developed. And I remember when we moved to California from Montana, I didn't want to go. I was angry at my parents. I was starting to play around. I was having some boyfriends. I was kind of getting into this field of teenage life, right? And so my parents were really hard on me. We were very conservative family, and I just rebelled. I just rebelled so hard. And so as I went into a large high school from a very rural community in Montana, all of a sudden it was like, what? And so the people that I began to be attracted to in conversation were the people who were like me, only they were using drugs to do what I could do naturally. So I would be like, well, you can hear colors and see sounds. And they're like, yeah. And they were all, high on something. And so because I was fighting with my parents and I really was searching for who I was and I was confused and I didn't have anybody to talk to about my gifts, I began to go into that space. And so I had a good couple years where having psychedelic experiences opened up different spaces than the space of just like I wouldn't call that my third eye was open or anything in those younger formative years. I just felt like that was my natural ability. That was just who I was. The veil never closed at birth for me, or at 2 years old. Around 2 years old is what I see in children. But I just opened up my third eye in a very low astral dense space. And I began to see only evil, only darkness, only spirits that felt super confronting, very scary. I felt like something attached to me that I couldn't get rid of. And I was terrified all the time. So, not being afraid of the dark, being terrified and paralyzed. And it's almost like when the spirits through the veil know that you can hear or see it, when you open yourself up like I did, and I didn't have the training to, I wouldn't call it protect myself now, but back then I would have loved some kind of tool set to be like, protect me, And I also I was learning. These experiences taught me about the difference between love versus fear. And what happens to, like earlier in the conversation, I said, like, what's your capacity to open yourself up to pure love? We cannot open up to pure love when we're in fear. Fear shuts those that, it's, you can have fear and love, but you can't, like, operationally as a human, you really need to be in one of those spaces. And so anyway, it opened up a lot of fear for me. And I spent the next decade trying to get away from that gift, which is why later in my life, I'm like, I'm not doing any of this. You and I have had that conversation, Jessica.
And
Like,
I'm like, yes, you are.
no, you're like, why aren't you doing this? I'm like, oh, you have no idea where I've been. I don't want this gift. I didn't choose this gift. And again, I didn't develop my gift.
Mhm.
It's not like, I see, I've still to this day, I've never taken a class on how to see through the veil or how to, try to do these things. It was just my story. It was just my life, but I saw a lot of darkness. But that's a really valuable part of my story. And I'm so deeply grateful for it because we live on a planet of polarities. And my role is I'm an alchemist. That's really, when I boil down, I call myself an architect of light. It took me a long time to find that name because I was like, what is it that I actually do in my work? I'm energy medicine, energy psychology. I'm working with energy fields, and I'm doing all these things, but like, what actually is my title? I have so many areas that I love and I've become excellent at that I was just like, I don't even know what I do. What do you do? Depends who I'm talking to. And I would just kind of compartmentalize myself depending on who I was. And so I think those earlier years of a lot of dense, I wouldn't even call them evil now. I would just call it's a density. And we attract the fears to ourselves. And there's a lot, that's like almost a training. I won't go into all of that because there's a lot to this. It's not like a simple, oh, I had a near-death experience, or, oh, I have that. We are living matrix of intelligence. And we're not only this human having this experience, but we are universally connected. And so there's just so much. Pick a portal and go in for a gazillion years, right? There's so many access points of what we're talking about. But to like frame it and to frame my story is that my teenage years were really rough. And I had some very traumatic experiences, which when you look at themes across our life, give us the experiences that allow us then to create. Our core wounding becomes our core healing. And then that becomes the gift we give each other, all of us. And so that can become our vocation. It can become how we show up in our jobs and in our communities and our target markets, but it's also how we show up in service. And so, side note is all of these things and the experiences I had in the name of Christianity in some cases. So for example, and I do consider myself Christian, and like I spent almost a year in a locked facility because my parents didn't know what to do with me when drugs got too bad, and I was in a locked facility for 9 months, and it was a Baptist Christian facility. No judgment on those. It just happened to be what it was. But what happened in that space for 9 months was so horrendous that it was almost worse than what happened to me to get me there. So I'm coming out of a lot of trauma in my teenage years. And then I get married when I'm 20 years old. And then I start having babies by 22. And so then I have 7 children. So I didn't give myself a lot of time to breathe. And so I began to get very ill. I started having autoimmune stuff. By the time I was 26, 27 years old, I had Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism. And then it was just like infection after infection after infection. I had mono multiple times. I could just keep going on and on and on and on. But by the time, as I build into my story, I have 7 homeschooled children. I'm running my personal clientele, but it's like I was over here and I was getting more and more sick. And I didn't know what to do because I have a lot of tools, but they weren't working. And I was like overriding and overriding. So I don't know if you guys are out there and you're practitioner types and you know just enough to just keep your system going, right? So I was experiencing my own illness and I didn't know what to do. And so I forgot to tell you one thing. I prayed for my gift to be removed from me in my mid-20s because I couldn't handle it. My husband had a busy work schedule and he would leave and travel quite a bit. And I was home with 2 small children and then 3. And I was terrified to go to sleep at night. I would have the kids in bed with me because I felt these spirits were very accosting. They were terrifying me. And so I'd leave all the lights on and yada, yada. In my early 30s, in an experience that I had moving to Jackson, Tennessee, all of it came back in one moment, meeting somebody. And I was like, oh, great. How am I supposed to deal with this? Because it was scary again. So it taught me the difference between faith and love. It taught me that I can't be in fear. And so I learned to start commanding my own energy system at that point. So I was moving through all of that while then also getting sick. So I had these gifts come back. I was dealing with autoimmune conditions. I was raising 7 homeschooled kids, living organically, sprouting, juicing, all this stuff. It was like a full-time job while working with clients, and my system just shut down. So then my near death started to happen at about 2 years in, about a year and a half to 2 years. It was probably a year and a half. I got so sick that I was having seizures every day. Or not every day, but pretty close to it. A seizure for me, I was awake. It wasn't like I was having an epileptic seizure. I was having convulsions so strongly because my heart was out of rhythm. I was in AFib, and then I would go into a panic attack because my heart wasn't beating properly. And then I would just literally like curl up like I was having an epileptic seizure, but it would sometimes last for more than 45 minutes or an hour and a half, where I was completely doing that for that long. So when I came out of those, my muscles and my whole system was so completely drained that it would take me 2 or 3 days before I could even move my body. My husband would have to carry me to the bathroom to even go to the bathroom, or I would crawl if he was at work. 7 homeschool kids. So my poor children at that time were very deeply traumatized, and we've had to go through a lot of healing, and they're all fine now. But point being is, as that escalated, I began to, like the remnants, I still was forcing myself, trying to force myself through, hook myself up with energy medicine, figure eights, make sure my energies and my polarities are proper. I was like doing every tool I had, and my diet was as meticulous, organic, and I'm like under 100 pounds because I can't eat. My stomach shut down. My first near-death experience was outside, me trying to weed my garden because I was bound and determined to stay relatively normal. And I remember it was a hot summer day in Tennessee, and my kids were out there, and then the kids got bored and left. And I did have a friend, Angela, over there. She was actually with us for a little while, and I got overheated and I worked too much and I got dizzy and I started to leave the garden and I just fell. And that was my first, I would call, little mini near-death experience, real near-death experience, where my spirit left my body. And I just remember seeing Angela over the top of my body, leaning right over, like standing on top of me, practically shaking me, going, "Don't die, please don't die, please don't die, not on my watch." And she's just like shaking me, and her tears are falling, and then I was back in my body, and she helped me walk up to my room. And same thing, Angela was over probably a month later. Same thing happened, is I just started going into where there's this feeling I get when I almost have a near-death experience. I've had multiples of them, and I'm like right through the veil, and I was going into the bathroom, and same thing happened. I passed out on the floor and I left my body. And it was short. It wasn't like I have a story to tell about that. I could actually probably go back in and hear what I was told, because there's always information in every one of these experiences. But at the time, you're just trying to be alive. So again, Angela comes in and she's like, "Not again. Oh my gosh, don't die, don't die." And she's calling the ambulance. And so I had many of those where it's interesting when you say like near death, an official near death experience. I don't even know how to qualify that. I have had so many close calls with death where the veil was very thin, where I knew that the fabric of my humanness was very loosely woven, which is why I was always attracted to Donna Eden Energy Medicine. Gave me a tool set that I could weave my energy together and hook myself into my body, because I didn't feel super stable in my body. That was just the bottom line. And I've always been an athletic, healthy person, but I could just tell that I was like loosely woven. So that those during my illness were the height of them. But the main one that I would call a profound near-death experience for me happened probably in that first, it was at the end towards that December of a year and a half, 2 years in to me being in bed almost nonstop. And I don't know how I did this, because I could hardly lift my arms. I had no energy, but I had a friend of mine who was a practitioner in Turkey. And she was working with me at a distance, and we would have pockets of results where I could get out of bed and I would feel pretty good. And I actually went and got certified in Qigong at one point and had some breakthroughs when I was doing deep healing breath work. And so I learned a lot about that, and I could manage my symptoms. I could do blood work and I could see what was happening, and then do a 9 breath technique and see my cells completely change form. It's very fascinating what power we have as individuals. But I wasn't aligned to heal yet. I needed to have more experiences, which is why unconsciously my energetic immune system was allowing these experiences, because I signed up for this. I needed to learn something. So many times we often just download it, like in the Matrix, put the chip in the back of the head and just download the whole thing. I want to bypass the learning process. And that's not my experience. I'm just so sorry. When miracles happen, they happen because somebody's already been prepared. And it seems like a miracle, but there was just no need for that experience for that person. And there's grace in that. But in the heavens, there's a universal law that they can't, like, we must go consciously through a lot of things. And then there are other things that maybe in our pre-earth life experiences that we didn't need to learn, but we're kind of going through it, and there's this grace drops in and somehow a miracle happens in our eyes. I don't know why that is, but my experience would be is if you've gone through a near-death experience or you've had some awakening, that's divinely orchestrated for your specific. If I know anything, I know that we are specifically in a matrix. We're specifically in a divine blueprint. And so I've stopped questioning that. Like, it's just, if I'm going through something, it's because it's part of something that I need to learn. And I have been saying for some time now that I am co-creating with my higher self that already knows what is required for my evolution, for my highest good.